Hey, I'm live. Except I'm gonna have to go close the window. Whoops, you're live on YouTube. Get back there. Oh, goodness. So I am. Here I am, and here you are. How nice. Monkey, hate monkey. Hate monkey. Ah. Snapchat is my favorite thing. Oh, fuck, it's so funny. I enjoy it like a 3-year-old does. It's just pure, you know. So it will be really hard to catch you guys up. Monkey. Flying car crashes? Why do we have to choose between monkeys and flying cars? Oh, right, because otherwise the monkey might get a hold of the flying car. That's firm but fair, I think. Let me find the book again. Yeah, he did not explain that at all. Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, the Jetsons were right in that we are all taking a lot of pills now, but they were wrong about everything else, I think. Hoping this collar looks nice. Kind of feel like Ruth Bader Ginsburg in it, but, you know, alive and less racist. Oh, I'm going to get cancelled today. I always thought I was going to get cancelled for taking me away from all this Mr. Spacely brackets Jensen's boss. Should tweet that. That's funny. Okay. At this point in the story, we're up to the point where, yeah, it seemed like a really stressful job that was also really vague, so you couldn't actually figure out how to do it. Right, so at this point, Dr. Willett, the family physician, finally concedes that Charles Ward is mad. Right? Everyone else is like, we date his madness from this horrific event, or this horrific event, or this one. And Dr. Willett's like, no. It's way later than all of that. Was Mr. Slag Fred Flintstone's boss? That also seemed vague, but Fred didn't seem to care, I think. So Charles Ward he's become very weird. And yeah, he's not mad till his handwriting changes, and he has certain archaic turns of phrase and has an unhealthy knowledge about the past and very little knowledge about the present or his own life. Which, it all makes sense to me. That seems fine. So Charles Ward is no longer living at home. He's living in a bungalow in Pawtuxet, near where Joseph Cohen's farm was, with Dr. Allen, a thin man. Hello, Flora. With a beard and dark glasses, and an evil-looking Portuguese man. Three's Company too. It's not the tune. Sorry, Flora needs kisses on the top of her head. And she'll do anything to get them. Shall we find another light so the people can see you, eh? You are the content they crave, aren't you? Are you the content they crave? There it goes. There it goes. There's the light for us. How's that? Are you being turned into content? You're becoming content. And she's becoming content. You can't hear her, but she's purring like crazy. So yeah, Dr. Willett's visiting Charles Ward, and he's like, "Oh, all the beauty, none of the biting." Yes. I'm not biting her yet. So Dr. Willett's like, "How are you feeling, Charles Dexter Ward?" And Dexter was like, "Very normal, thank you, doctor. I am reacting appropriately to situations and stimuli, um, which I adore to do. I love to react appropriately to situations and events." And Dr. Willett's like, peculiar. And yet, a madman never knows he's mad. Which is ridiculous because we absolutely do know that. So I think that's pretty much where we were up to. You just don't show up very well on film. You are not being good content. Oh, I'm sorry. Of course you are. Of course she is. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I simply adore to behave appropriately. Some of my favorite things are having appropriate and normal reactions to everyday situations. I love to display normal coping mechanisms. I know. It's one of my main hobbies. Stimuli, situations, uh, emotional triggers, being appropriate, all that stuff. Love it. Can't get enough. Okay. So we're in part 4, I believe. Chapter 4. And right at the end of the last chapter, it says, emo trig in the stimuli. Hi, Meredy. The end of the last chapter said they would have given much for a glimpse of the papers Charles had found, for clearly the key to the youth's madness lay in what he had learned of the ancient wizard and his doings. She's looking at Fitz, who's sitting on Mum's chair. He's just washing. He's not doing anything wrong. And she's just looking at him. Hey, you trying to kill him with your mind? And yet, after all, it was from no step of Mr. Ward's or Dr. Willett's that the next move in this singular case proceeded. Hi, Daniel. This is the case of Charles Dexter Ward. It's all in the title. And it's part 11. He just writes it down as facts. I don't know what mine does. Probably doesn't write it down as fact. They just have no idea that we are human sometimes. The father and the physician, rebuffed and confused by a shadow too shapeless and intangible to combat, had rested uneasily on their oars while the typed notes of young Ward to his parents grew fewer and fewer. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I am human and I need to be loved. Meredy. I mean, we're not proper humans, we're New Zealanders. Yeah, facts are implied opinions. Facts, look, you can make up whatever facts you like and you can tell people them on the bus. Very few people can stop you. You are such a pain. I've got Flora with me. You can see the outline of her head, kind of. Right, so he's writing typewritten notes to his parents, which is not at all concerning. Then came the first of the month with its customary financial adjustments, and the clerks at certain banks began a peculiar shaking of heads and telephoning from one to the other. Officials who knew Charles Ward by sight went down to the bungalow to ask why every cheque of his appearing at this juncture was a clumsy forgery, and were reassured less than they ought to have been when the youth hoarsely explained that his hand had lately been so much affected by a nervous shock as to make normal writing impossible. He could, he said, form no written characters at all except with great difficulty, and could prove it by the fact that he had been forced to type all his recent letters, even those to his father and mother, who would bear out the assertion. The hate aura. Yeah. She's got a big hate aura. She's gifted at hate. I'm proud of her. What made the investigators pause in confusion was not this circumstance alone, for that was nothing unprecedented or fundamentally suspicious, nor even the Pawtuxet gossip, of which one or two of them had caught echoes. It was the muddled discourse of the young man which nonplussed them, implying as it did a virtually total loss of memory concerning important monetary matters which he had had at his fingertips only a month or two before. Something was wrong, for despite the apparent coherence and rationality of his speech, there could be no normal reason for this ill-concealed blankness on vital points. Moreover, although none of these men knew Ward well, they could not help observing the change in his language and manner. They had heard he was an antiquarian, but even the most hopeless antiquarians do not make daily use of obsolete phraseology and gestures. Altogether, this combination of hoarseness, palsied hands, bad memory, and altered speech and bearing must represent some disturbance or malady of genuine gravity, which no doubt formed the basis of the prevailing odd rumours. And after their departure, the party of officials decided that a talk with the senior ward was imperative. They're going to tell his dad on him. Ooh, So on the 6th of March, 1928, there was a long and serious conference in Mr. Ward's office, after which the utterly bewildered father summoned Dr. Willett in a kind of helpless resignation. Willett looked over the strained and awkward signatures of the cheques and compared them in his mind with the penmanship of that last frantic note. Charles Ward sent Dr. Willett a note saying, "I'll explain everything tomorrow. For the love of God, I have tapped into something dark and evil. Shoot Dr. Allen on sight and dissolve his body in acid. Don't burn it." And then the next time they met, Charles Ward is just like, "Oh no, doctor, I'm fine. I am fantastically well." 1928, we did have wheat pennies. 1928, why? A string of licorice cost you a nickel. We didn't even know what a nickel was back then, Mac. I yield my time. So I'm trying to find my place again. Certainly the change in handwriting was radical and profound, and yet there was something damnably familiar about the new writing. It had crabbed and archaic tendencies of a very curious sort, and seemed to result from a type of stroke utterly different from that which the youth had always used. It was strange, but where had he seen it before? On the whole, it was obvious that Charles was insane. Of that there could be no doubt. Exactly. Ugh, running through the wheat fields. It does. It does. On the whole, it was obvious that Charles was insane, of that there could be no doubt. And since it appeared unlikely that he could handle his property or continue to deal with the outside world much longer, something must quickly be done toward his oversight and possible cure. It was that the alienists were called in, Doctors Peck and Waite of Providence, and Dr. Lyman of Boston, to whom Mr. Ward and Dr. Willett gave the most exhaustive possible history of the case, and who conferred at length in the now unused library of the young patient, examining what books and papers of his were left in order to gain some further notion of his habitual mental cast. After scanning this material and examining the ominous note to Willett, the "Please help me dissolve Dr. Allen in acid" note, as it's known, I was. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of aniseed myself. And also, yes, John, you are a rude bugger. But I was also going to say, yes, he had also started masturbating with his offhand. Curious. We date his madness definitively to this point. I am no better than John. I'm sorry, Danny. After scanning this material and examining the ominous note to Willett, "Please help me," they all agreed that Charles Ward's studies had been enough to unseat or at least to warp any ordinary intellect, and wished most heartily that they could see his more intimate volumes and documents. But this latter they knew they could do, if at all, only after a scene at the bungalow itself. Bungalow is such a funny word. Thank you. Sits on his hand before writing so it feels like an ancient wizard. And thank you for loving the look. There's the collar is a pearl necklace separate from the dress, and the earrings are just cheap glass ones that my sister sent me. Thank you very much. So kind. Thank you. Oh shit. I got so excited about um being complimented that I went back and lost the story. It does a little bit. I mean, I thought about uh no, I'm not going to say what Halloween costume I thought about because I don't want to get cancelled. I don't want people to go back and make clips of this and then be like, "Oh no, look, awful." I mean, there are so many other clips to prove that I'm awful. Right. Willett now reviewed the whole case with febrile energy, it being at this time that he obtained the statements of the workmen who had seen Charles find the Kerwin documents, and that he collated the incidents of the destroyed newspaper items, looking up the latter at the journal office. Oh, freaks. Freaks have the time to do that, and they do. On Thursday, the 8th of March, Doctors Willett, Peck, Lyman, and Waite, accompanied by Mr. Ward, paid the youth their momentous call, making no concealment of their object and questioning the now acknowledged patient with extreme minuteness. Charles, though he was inordinately long in answering the summons, and was still redolent of strange and noxious laboratory odours when he did finally make his agitated appearance, proved a far from recalcitrant subject, and admitted freely that his memory and balance had suffered somewhat from close application to abstruse studies. He offered no resistance when his removal to other quarters was insisted upon, and seemed indeed to display a high degree of intelligence, as apart from mere memory. No Zealanders. Yeah, they're just being nationalist, that's all. His conduct would have sent his interviewers away in bafflement had not the persistently archaic trend of his speech and unmistakable replacement of modern by ancient ideas in his consciousness marked him out as one definitely removed from the normal. Of his work, he would say no more to the group of doctors than he had formerly said to his family and to Dr. Willett, and his frantic note of the previous month he dismissed as mere nerves and hysteria. He insisted that this shadowy bungalow possessed no library or laboratory beyond the visible ones. He's got these little fake libraries and laboratories. It's weird. It's not actually fooling anyone. Yeah, but that's the whole point of Cthulhu. That's why Call of Cthulhu is such a great game, because no one's like, oh well, we're gonna go home. There's the only way to win is not to play, but you're like, I want to know. I kind of want to, you know. Um, right, he insisted that the shadowy bungalow possessed no library or laboratory beyond the visible ones, and waxed abstruse in explaining the absence from the house of such odours as now saturated all his clothing. Neighbourhood gossip he attributed to nothing more than the cheap inventiveness of baffled curiosity. Look, if you concentrate hard enough, you can do anything in a bathroom. You can do science, you can do art, you can do interpretive dance, you can do normal dance. You can. That's all I can think of. Oh, yeah, the Call of Cthulhu game. I watched a walkthrough of that on YouTube. It was really good. Of the whereabouts of Dr. Allen, the guy who lives with him, who his frantic note said, please dissolve him in acid, he said he did not feel at liberty to speak definitely, but assured his inquisitors that the bearded and spectacled man would return when needed. And paying off the stolid brava, the Portuguese guy who lives with him, who resisted all questioning by the visitors, and enclosing the bungalow, which still seemed to hold such nighted secrets, Ward showed no sign of nervousness, save a very barely noticed tendency to pause, as though listening for something very faint. He was apparently animated by a calmly philosophic resignation, as if his removal were the merest transient incident which would cause the least trouble if facilitated and disposed of once and for all. It was clear that he trusted his obviously unimpaired keenness of absolute mentality to overcome all the embarrassments into which his twisted memory, his lost voice and handwriting, and his secretive and eccentric behaviour had led him. His mother, it was agreed, was not to be told of the change, his father supplying typed notes in his name. Ward was taken to the restfully and picturesquely situated private hospital maintained by Dr. Waite on Cananicut Island in the Bay, and subjected to the closest scrutiny and questioning by all the physicians connected with the case. It was then that the physical oddities were noticed: the slackened metabolism, the altered skin, and the disproportionate neural reactions. Dr. Willett was the most perturbed of the various examiners, for he had attended Ward all his life and could appreciate with terrible keenness the extent of his physical disorganization. Even the familiar olive mark on his hip was gone. Well, oh, that's right, the doctor is his doctor. I was like, how did he know about the birthmark on the guy's hip? That's their business. And on his chest was a great black mole or cicatrice, which had never been there before, and which made Willett wonder whether the youth had ever submitted to any of the witch markings reputed to be inflicted at certain unwholesome nocturnal meetings in wild and lonely places. The doctor could not keep his mind off a certain transcribed witch trial record from Salem, which Charles had shown him in the old non-secretive days, and which read, Mr. G.B. on that night put the devil his mark upon Bridget S., Jonathan A., Simon O., Deliverance W., Joseph C., Susan P., Myrtle C., and Deborah B. Listeners who are listening will remember that Simon Orne and Joseph Curwen are probably the ones named here. Ward's face, too, troubled him horribly, till at length he suddenly discovered why he was horrified. For above the young man's right eye was something which he had never previously noticed. A small scar or pit, precisely like that in the crumbled painting of old Joseph Curwen, and perhaps attesting some hideous ritualistic inoculation to which both had submitted at a certain stage of their occult careers. Oh yeah, the keenness of the Who to the What is utterly indispensable. Um, a wild and lonely place could use a bit of a devil's poke, has to be said. While Ward himself was puzzling all the doctors at the hospital, a very strict watch was kept on all mail addressed to either him or Dr. Allen, which Mr. Ward had ordered delivered at the family home. Willett had predicted that very little would be found, since any communications of a vital nature would probably have been exchanged by messenger. But in the latter part of March, there did come a letter from Prague for Dr. Allen, which gave both the doctor and the father deep thought. It was in a very crabbed and archaic hand, and though clearly not the effort of a foreigner, showed almost as singular a departure from modern English as the speech of young Ward himself. It read, "Hi, Josh." That's not what the letter said. That's just what I said. I don't know. It seems to me like the obvious explanation that he was just so in love with this ancestor that he gave himself the scar and started talking like him and maybe had a psychotic break. I don't know. But they're like, something's wrong. We just don't know what. And Dr. Willett's like, there's definitely some witchcraft going on here. I'm a psychiatrist. Kleinstrasse 11, Altstadt, Prague, 11th February 1928. I think. Brother in Almuzan Metatron, I this day received your mention of what came up from the salts I sent you. It was wrong. It means clearly that the headstones had been changed when Barnabas got me the specimen. It is often so, as you must be sensible of from the thing you got from the King's Chapel ground in 1769, and what H got from Old Burying Point in 1690, that was like to end him. I got such a thing in Egypt 75 years gone, from the which came that scar the boy saw on me here in 1924. As I told you long ago, do not call up that which you cannot put down, either from dead salts or out of the spheres beyond. Have the words for laying at all times ready, and stop not to be sure when there is any doubt of whom you have. Stones are all changed now in 9 grounds out of 10. You are never sure till you question. I this day heard from H, who has had trouble with the soldiers. He is like to be sorry Transylvania has passed from Hungary to Romania, and would change his seat if the castle weren't so full of what we know. But of this he hath doubtless writ you. In my next sending there will be somewhat from a hill tomb from the east that will delight you greatly. Meanwhile, forget not I am desirous of B.F. if you can possibly get him for me. You know G in Philadelphia better than I. Have him up first if you will, but do not use him so hard he will be difficult, for I must speak to him in the end. Yog Sothoth Neblod Zin, Simon O. To Mr. J.C. in Providence. So that letter really only makes sense if you've been listening to the entire story and remember all of it, which is probably no one. But oh yeah, heavy metal, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, everything was satanic. It's like none of that was actually happening, but then a bunch of Christian grifters like got some fairly good money by going around various churches being like, I used to be a vampire. It's true. JC, probably Joseph Kerwin, but it's a good guess. Mr. Ward and Dr. Willett paused in utter chaos before this apparent bit of unrelieved insanity. Oh, they're reading my tweets. Get it? Yeah, Merity. God, this must be confusing. It's so great. I'm happy. Only by degrees did they absorb what it seemed to imply. So the absent Dr. Allen, and not Charles Ward, had come to be the leading spirit at Pawtuxet. That must explain the wild reference and denunciation in the youth's last frantic letter. And what of the addressing of the bearded and spectacled stranger as Mr. J.C.? Joseph Kerwin. There was no escaping the inference, but there are limits to possible monstrosity. Who was Simon O., the old man Ward had visited in Prague 4 years previously? Perhaps, but in the centuries behind, there had been another Simon O., Simon Orne, alias Jedediah of Salem, who vanished in 1771, and whose peculiar handwriting Dr. Willett now unmistakably recognized from the photostatic copies of the Orne formulae which Charles had once shown him. What horrors and mysteries, what contradictions and contraventions of nature had come back after a century and a half to harass old Providence with her clustered spires and domes? Ah, Lovecraft just loves Providence. Blackleaf, you're dead. Get out. No. Just having a drink. Pure NZ spring water. Well, tap water. Pure NZ tap water. I have to move carefully. Otherwise the beast will wake up. See, I would be excited to go to Rhode Island because it's Lovecraft country. But apart from that, yeah. Oh, it's because of Stephen King. It's like there's Lovecraft country and then there's Stephen King country. And that's like, oh, sweetie. I wish you would sit where the people could see you. Can I move you this way a little bit? Just a little bit. You've still got my arm. Just to make it slightly easier for me to read, okay? Alright? Go back to sleep. Oh, yeah. New Orleans. This Florabella. Oh, God, no. No, don't trick anyone into visiting Palmerston North. I mean, you could write a horror series set there. That's not difficult. Actually, it was an ancient wizard who yelled slurs at me out of a moving van in Palmerston North. Oh my gosh, Josh, we need to talk about Interview with the Vampire. Absolutely. I need to know everything you think about it. But now's probably not the time. I was obsessed with that movie in high school. I've seen it, conservative estimate, over 50 times. Not even kidding. Ronald Hugh Morrison. Don't know. Well, I can't prove it's young wizards. It's wizards. But yeah. They yell at everybody from moving cars in Palmerston North. Racial slurs that aren't your race. Homophobic slurs that don't even apply. Just love to yell awful words at people from moving cars. It's what we call our economy. Oh, I'm not familiar with Ronald Hugh Morrison. Oh, I've got to post a picture of the clock tower in Palmerston North. It Yeah, phallic isn't the word because it kind of implies that it was by accident. I don't think it was by accident. The scarecrow. Huh. Cool. Anyway, sorry. Let's crack on. Um, the father and the old physician, virtually at a loss what to do or think, went to see Charles at the hospital and questioned him as delicately as they could about Dr. Allen, about the Prague visit, and about what he had learned of Simon or Jedediah Orne of Salem. To all these inquiries, the youth was politely non-committal, merely barking in his hoarse whisper that he had found Dr. Allen to have a remarkable spiritual rapport with certain souls from the past, and that any correspondent the bearded man might have in Prague would probably be similarly gifted. He sees people. When they left, Mr. Ward and Dr. Willett realized to their chagrin, 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 I don't know how to pronounce that word, that they had really been the ones under catechism, and that without imparting anything vital himself, the confined youth had adroitly pumped them of everything the Prague letter had contained. Love to be adroitly pumped by a youth who's archaically phrasing some shit. That is a really good opening sentence. Chagrin. Chagrin. Huh. Oh, Flora is just so heavy right now. Doctors Peck, Waite, and Lyman were not inclined to attach much importance to the strange correspondence of young Ward's companion, for they knew the tendency of kindred eccentrics and monomaniacs to band together, and believed that Charles or Allen had merely unearthed an expatriated counterpart, perhaps one who had seen Orne's handwriting and copied it, in an attempt to pose as the bygone character's reincarnation. Allen himself was perhaps a similar case, and may have persuaded the youth into accepting him as an avatar of the long-dead Curwen. Such things had been known before, and on the same basis the hard-headed doctors disposed of Willett's growing disquiet about Charles Ward's present handwriting, as studied from unpremeditated specimens obtained by various ruses. Willett thought he had placed its odd familiarity at last, and that what it vaguely resembled was the bygone penmanship of old Joseph Curwen himself. But this the other physicians regarded as a phase of imitativeness only to be expected in a mania of this sort, and refused to grant it any importance, either favourable or unfavourable. Alternative facts, diet truth. Recognizing this prosaic attitude in his colleagues, Dr. Willett advised Mr. Ward to keep to himself the letter which arrived for Dr. Allen on the 2nd of April, from Rakus, Transylvania, in a writing so intensely and fundamentally like that of the Hutchinson cipher that both father and physician paused in awe before breaking the seal. This read as follows. Oh, and here's another word that I can't pronounce, but Castle Forense? That's definitely not how you pronounce it. 7th of March, 1928. Dear C, had a squad of 20 militia up to talk about what the country folk say. Must dig deeper and have less heard. These Romanians plague me damnably, being officious in particular, where you could buy a Magyar off with a drink and food. Last month M got me the sarcophagus of the 5 sphinxes from the Acropolis, where he whom I called up said it would be, and I have had 3 talks with what was therein inhumed. It will go to S.O. in Prague directly, and thence to you. It is stubborn, but you know the way with such. You show wisdom in having less about them before, for there was no need to keep the guards in shape and eating off their heads, and it made much to be found in case of trouble, as you too well know. You can now move and work elsewhere with no killing trouble if needful, though I hope no thing will soon force you to so bothersome a course. I rejoice that you traffic not so much with those outside, for there was ever a mortal peril in it, and you are sensible what it did when you asked protection of one not disposed to give it. You excel me in getting the formulae so another may say them with success, but Borellus fancied it would be so if just the right words were had. Does the boy use them often? I regret that he grows squeamish, as I feared he would when I had him here nigh 15 months, but am sensible that you know how to deal with him. You can't say him down with the formula, for that will work only upon such as the other formula hath called up from salts. But you still have strong hands and knife and pistol, and graves are not hard to dig, nor asses loath to burn. O says you have promised him B.F. I must have him after. B goes to you soon, and may he give you what you wish of that dark thing below Memphis. Employ care in what you call up, and beware of the boy. It will be ripe in a year's time to have up the legions from underneath, and then there are no bounds to what shall be ours. Have confidence in what I say, for you know O and I have had these 150 years more than you to consult these matters in. Nefrin Khan Nyhadoth, Edward H., for J. Kerwin, Esquire, Providence. So, again, probably not going to make a lot of sense. I really wish you could see Flora, because it would make having her actual incredibly heavy weight on my arm worthwhile. Hello. You going backward? You going backward? Oh, no. You went all the way backwards. Oh, no. No, she's back on my arm. Christ, she's heavy. But if Willett and Mr. Ward refrained from showing this letter to the alienists, they did not refrain from acting upon it themselves. No amount of learned sophistry could controvert the fact that the strangely bearded and spectacled Dr. Allen, of whom Charles's frantic letter had spoken as such a monstrous menace, was in close and sinister correspondence with two inexplicable creatures whom Ward had visited in his travels, and who plainly claimed to be survivals or avatars of Kerwin's old Salem colleagues, that he was regarding himself as the reincarnation of Joseph Kerwin, and that he entertained, or was at least advised to entertain, murderous designs against a boy who could scarcely be other than Charles Ward. There was organized horror afoot, and no matter who had started it, the missing Allen was by this time at the bottom of it. Therefore, thanking heaven that Charles was now safe at the hospital, Mr. Ward lost no time in engaging detectives to learn all they could of the cryptic bearded doctor, finding whence he had come and what Pawtuxet knew of him, and if possible discovering his current whereabouts. Supplying the men with one of the bungalow keys which Charles yielded up, he urged them to explore Allen's vacant room, which had been identified when the patient's belongings had been packed, obtaining what clues they could from any effects he might have left about. Mr. Ward talked with the detectives in his son's old library, and they felt a marked relief when they left it at last, for there seemed to hover about the place a vague aura of evil. Perhaps it was what they had heard of the infamous old wizard whose picture had once stared from the panelled overmantel, and perhaps it was something different and irrelevant, but in any case they all half sensed an intangible miasma which centered in that carven vestige of an older dwelling, and which at times almost rose to the intensity of a material emanation. The end of chapter 4. We're up to part 5, A Nightmare and a Cataclysm. Miasma! If you would like me to read another chapter, Say yes or no. First vote gets it. Oh my goodness. My asthma. My asthma. Sucks to your asthma. Hooray, we won. Good job, Mary Lee. We won? Chapter 5, A Nightmare and a Cataclysm. 1. And now swiftly followed that hideous experience which has left its indelible mark of fear on the soul of Marinus Bicknell Willett, and has added a decade to the visible age of one whose youth was even then far behind. Dr. Willett had conferred at length with Mr. Ward, and had come to an agreement with him on several points which both felt the alienists would ridicule. Vote early, vote often. Hell yes. No, my voice is fine. It always goes croaky after talking because I kind of wrecked it in the horror maze, I think. Doing the horror maze for like 2 or 3 years. It was worth it. I can't sing anyway, so why not? There was, they conceded, a terrible movement alive in the world whose direct connection with a necromancy even older than the Salem witchcraft could not be doubted. That at least 2 living men, and one other of whom they dared not think, were in absolute possession of minds or personalities which had functioned as early as 1690 or before, was likewise almost unassailably proved even in the face of all known natural laws. What these horrible creatures, and Charles Ward as well, were doing or trying to do seemed fairly clear from their letters and from every bit of light, both old and new, which had filtered in upon the case. They were robbing the tombs of all the ages, including those of the world's wisest and greatest men, in the hope of recovering from the bygone ashes some vestige of the consciousness and law which had once animated and informed them. I feel like this bit Lovecraft was told to put in because people were reading it going, wait, what? What's going on? Who's. What? I'll never sing with that attitude. No. No, that's true. Haha. Just because I can't sing doesn't mean I don't love karaoke. Because no one can stop me and they all have to be nice. Isn't that right? I need my lip gloss. My lip colour, whatever you call it. Well, I know. I can't have my mirror. Because I can't reach it and you're on my knee. Ugh, I know. God, I really hope that's. I'm using my screen for a mirror and can't see that well. It's fine. It'll be fine. Hey, putty cat, where have you been? Where has you been? Hey? Ooh. I was looking at Flora and she was looking at me and I said, "What's like to live deliciously?" Because I've been meaning to watch The Witch again. And she gave me this look like, "Bitch, I already live deliciously." Are you kidding? She's so right. Right. A hideous traffic was going on among these nightmare ghouls, whereby illustrious bones were bartered with the calm calculativeness of schoolboys swapping books. And from what was extorted from this century dust, there was anticipated a power and a wisdom beyond anything which the cosmos had ever seen concentrated in one man or group. Yes. Pretty pixels, that's good then. They're digging up all the wise men from the tombs. They can extract their DNA and combine them to form Serpentor to lead Cobra to victory over G.I. Joe. That's exactly what's happening. That's what they were trying to do in Salem. Ow! Yeah, polite hands, thank you, madam. She's like, no. impolite hands with the spikes out. They had found unholy ways to keep their brains alive, either in the same body or different bodies, and had evidently achieved a way of tapping the consciousness of the dead whom they gathered together. There had, it seems, been some truth in chimerical old Borellus when he wrote of preparing from even the most antique remains certain essential salts from which the shade of a long dead living thing might be raised up. There was a formula for evoking such a shade, and another for putting it down, and it had now been so perfected that it could be taught successfully. But one must be careful about evocations, for the markers of old graves are not always accurate. Oh, she's such a naughty girl, aren't you? Willett and Mr. Ward shivered as they passed from conclusion to conclusion. Things, presences, or voices of some sort, could be drawn down from unknown places, as well as from the grave, and in this process also one must be careful. Joseph Curwen had indubitably evoked many forbidden things, and as for Charles, what might one think of him? What forces outside the spheres had reached him from Joseph Curwen's day and turned his mind on forgotten things? He had been led to find certain directions, and he had used them. He had talked with the man of horror in Prague, and stayed long with the creature in the mountains of Transylvania. And he must have found the grave of Joseph Curwen at last. That newspaper item and what his mother had heard in the night were too significant to overlook. Then he had summoned something, and it must have come. That mighty voice aloft on Good Friday, and those different tones in the locked attic laboratory. What were they like with their depth and hollowness? Was there not here some awful foreshadowing of the dreaded stranger Dr. Allen with his spectral bass? Yes, that was what Mr. Ward had felt with vague horror in his single talk with the man, if man it were, over the telephone. No, no, Josh too. I'm sorry, they would have started a channel called Unboxing Vid. Get it? Unboxing, because they would turn up in like coffins and stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, we got that which you know of from under the Sphinx. Oh my god, it's amazing. First thing I like about it is how it seems. What hellish consciousness or voice, what morbid shade or presence had come to answer Charles Ward's secret rites behind that locked door? Those voices heard in argument. Must have it read for 3 months. Good God, was that not just before the vampirism broke out? Yeah, there was vampirism in the previous chapter. The rifling of Ezra Whedon's ancient grave, and the cries later at Pawtuxet. Whose mind had planned the vengeance and rediscovered the shunned seat of elder blasphemies? And then the bungalow and the bearded stranger, and the gossip and the fear. The final madness of Charles neither father nor doctor could attempt to explain. But they did feel sure that the mind of Joseph Curwen had come to earth again and was following its ancient morbidities. I still need a shiny Curwen. They're like, sometimes the labels are switched on account of it being a really old graveyard, like super old graveyard. So you don't really know what you're going to be unboxing, which is like kind of exciting, but also it's kind of like, really thought I was getting Ben Franklin this time. Was demoniac possession in truth a possibility? Alan had something to do with it, and the detectives must find out more about one whose existence menaced the young man's life. In the meantime, since the existence of some vast crypt beneath the bungalow seemed virtually beyond dispute, Some effort must be made to find it. Willett and Mr. Ward, conscious of the skeptical attitude of the alienists, resolved during their final conference to undertake a joint secret exploration of unparalleled thoroughness, and agreed to meet at the bungalow on the following morning with valises and with certain tools and accessories suited to architectural search and underground exploration. I know what they mean by accessories, but I'm just thinking about them having like matching trucker caps and heart shaped Lolita sunglasses. Stumbled upon the essential peppers. Yeah, and the essential cinnamon challenge. Ugh. The morning of April the 6th dawned clear, and both explorers were at the bungalow by 10 o'clock. Mr. Ward had the key, and an entry and cursory survey were made. From the disordered condition of Dr. Allen's room, it was obvious that the detectives had been there before, and the later searchers hoped that they had found some clue which might prove of value. Of course, the main business lay in the cellar, so thither they descended without much delay, again making the circuit which each had vainly made before in the presence of the mad young owner. Honey and cheese on salty crackers. What? That's, I mean, you gotta live your life, but that's really weird. But I'm proud of you for doing a weird thing and not being ashamed. For a time, everything seemed baffling, every inch of the earthen floor and stone walls having so solid and innocuous an aspect that the thought of a yawning aperture was scarcely to be entertained. Willett reflected that since the original cellar was dug without knowledge of any catacombs beneath, the beginning of the passage would represent the strictly modern delving of young Ward and his associates, where they had probed for the ancient vaults whose rumour could have reached them by no wholesome means. Joseph Curwen, back in the olden days, had a farm in this kind of spot that was rumoured to have subterranean tunnels and crypts and stuff underneath. But no one ever found them. Honey and cheese? Okay, yeah, when you put it like that. When you put it like a hobbit feast at that guy Bjorn's house, that guy ruled. He should have been the main character of everything. The doctor tried to put himself in Charles's place to see how a delver would be likely to start, but could not gain much inspiration from this method. Yeah, no shit, because you don't know where the tunnels are. You just figured that out in the last paragraph. Then he decided on elimination as a policy and went carefully over the whole subterranean surface, both vertical and horizontal, trying to account for every inch separately. He was soon substantially narrowed down, and at last had nothing left but the small platform before the wash tubs, which he had tried once before in vain. Now experimenting in every possible way, and exerting a double strength, he finally found that the top did indeed turn and slide horizontally on a corner pivot. Beneath it lay a trim concrete surface with an iron manhole, to which Mr. Ward at once rushed with excited zeal. The cover was not hard to lift, and the father had quite removed it when Willett noticed the queerness of his aspect. He was swaying and nodding dizzily, and in the gust of noxious air which swept up from the black pit beneath, the doctor soon recognized ample cause. In a moment, Dr. Willett had his fainting companion on the floor above and was reviving him with cold water. Mr. Ward responded feebly, but it could be seen that the mephitic blast from the crypt had in some way gravely sickened him. Wishing to take no chances, Willett hastened out to Broad Street for a taxicab, and had soon dispatched the sufferer home despite his weak-voiced protests, after which he produced an electric torch, covered his nostrils with a band of sterile gauze, and descended once more to peer into the newfound depths. The foul air had now slightly abated, and Willett was able to send a beam of light down the Stygian hole. For about 10 feet, he saw it was a sheer cylindrical drop with concrete walls and an iron ladder, after which the hole appeared to strike a flight of old stone steps, which must originally have emerged to earth somewhat southwest of the present building. End of Chapter 5, Part 1. What? He has found the third axis of movement. It's very exciting. Good advice. I have for my tea, which is what we call dinner. Well, not all of New Zealand, just the working class, I guess. I have some tiny vegan hot dogs. They're really nice. I like them a lot. Because I'm an adult. I'm not going to call it dinner when it's just me eating some vegan hot dogs out of a disposable plate. Hey, it's alright, Josh. I'm wrapping up now because I've read too many chapters already. We've been going for about an hour. So I will see you tomorrow for D&D, and we should talk about Interview with the Vampire at some point. We said we weren't going to talk about that. Yeah, DM me. We'll talk about vampires, but yeah. Yeah, people in Otago often call lunch dinner as well. It's just a regional thing, but it's regional based on what region of Britain you came from. Well, your great grandparents came from, or something. It's all rather confusing, really. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me. This has been fun. The cat has been so fucking heavy, haven't you? Oh, be the baby, kitty, be the baby. Oh, she loves to be the baby. No, don't really say supper. She's laying upside down because she knows that eventually my bullshit will end and she shall get a saucer of milk. You're gonna get some milk? It's calcitrim. So 2% milk. Or like no percent milk or something. Milk? She wants to live deliciously. We gotta go. Thanks, everybody. Wash your hands, look after each other. See you tomorrow.